Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Silmarillion Film Project. I am your co-host Dave Kale, and I am excited because tonight we are talking Frame Story for Season 5. We're in Season 5, right?
It is still Season 5.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Just making sure. Right. I wasn't sure if we were already in Season 20 yet.
Right. Season 5. I mean, like the way that we keep changing this, the way that we approach the seasons keeps adding more and more sessions to every season. So it kind of feels like we should be done with Season 5, but not quite yet.
There's certain malcontents that keep advocating for splitting seasons and moving things
That's
around.
true.
No one who would be identifiable on the on the live stream tonight.
Definitely not.
Not naming names. So.
No,
it's Nick.
Right.
Who's joining us tonight, by the way?
That's right.
I'm sorry to inform you guys, very sorry to inform you guys that Marie and I were doing a calculation, and our most conservative estimate is about 25 seasons.
25 seasons. Okay. Okay.
Without like skipping huge chunks of the story.
Sounds about right. Sounds about right. I think that was about the ballpark that I was thinking. And considering that we're moving forward at what, about like a year and a quarter per season or so at this point, that sets us back a bit, 20 more years. So about 25 more actual chronological years worth of getting through the 20 seasons. So the good news is we'll probably live that long, most of us. So
I plan on it.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know about you, but I plan on living forever. So
okay, I don't, but I do plan on living 25 years. So that should be fine. That should be fine. I'll be
plans of that kind nearly always work out.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Really well.
Yeah, that's my experience.
If it works for Commander Riker, it works for me. So
right. Right. Yeah, but no, it's so far people have been laughing at me for a while about all of these ridiculously long-term projects that I have embarked upon, but so far so good. I mean, I remember, Dave, back when we first started Riddles in the Dark, I remember having conversations with like some of the Signum people at the time. And they're being like, are you sure you're going to be able to, because, if you start this, you really need to keep it going for 3 full years. Like, are you going to be able to stick with this for 3 full years? And now I'm like, please, 3 years. That was a blink of an eye,
That's adorable.
But yeah, so no, we're going strong.
It's true. That's true. That's impressive. Some impressive staying power.
Yeah. No, I don't have any reason to think. Certainly this and Exploring the Lord of the Rings, and of course Mythgard Academy is completely open-ended. So, those 3, I have no reason to think I won't still be doing all 3 of these broadcasts when I'm like 70. So there you are. So it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Yeah, actually, it was fun. I just did this past week. I just did an interview with the Nerd of the Rings YouTube channel. Matt, the host of the Nerd of the Rings, had me on his show, and we were actually talking about Film quite a bit. His viewers were really fascinated by the Film project. So I'm like, hey, plenty of space, still time to jump in. Not quite at the ground floor, but you could still probably get in, fairly low down, if you jump in now.
Baron and Luthien coming right up.
Absolutely. That's certainly a moment to jump in if ever there were. But we should probably move on towards what we're meant to talk about tonight, which means that first I need to do my announcements, which are not too many, just 2 things, both of which I've talked about before, but wanted to remind folks about. First, Mythmoot coming up. I announced Mythmoot. I don't know if I've talked about Mythmoot at Film actually, but I've been talking about it at my other broadcasts. So Mythmoot 8, The World Ahead, as in home is behind, the world ahead, and there are many paths to tread. We're thinking about the future, and we're thinking about literary depictions of the future. So that's going to be the end of June 24th to 27th, back to our regular June timeframe for Mythmoot. Moot Hub and Mootcast registration is available now. Mythmoot is probably going to be fully digital again this year. I'm still not totally closing the door. It's, June. We're going to wait and see what things look like. If there's any chance of our doing some kind of hybrid thing with Mythmoot, we'll make a final determination on that at the end of March. But in the meantime, we know that the digital registration is definitely happening. And if we end up doing any hybrid thing, we'll have an upgrade, for folks who have already enrolled digitally. So that'll be fine. But in any case,
Corey, what's the Gandalf quote again? Something about little hope, but not no hope.
Not no. That's exactly what I've been quoting. Yes, I have little hope, but not no hope. That's exactly it. Yeah, that's it. So that's one thing. Mythmoot, check it out. signumuniversity.org/Mythmoot. You can hear more about our keynote speakers. You can hear more about. There's the information to submit a proposal. So lots of fun opportunities there. And then Signum Academy clubs. We are currently we've already begun forming our first sections of our brand new program, Signum Academy clubs, our extracurricular program for kids grades 3 through 12. We have our book club, our creative writing club, our language conversation club, and our translation club. So we have, as I say, several sections already forming. Wanted to strongly invite people. A lot of the folks who are joining clubs here at the beginning are homeschoolers. So it's just one thing I would particularly say for anyone who is homeschooling or who knows people who are homeschooling. It's a really great opportunity for curricular supplementation in a kind of thing that I know that very few even wonderful homeschooling parents often don't have the opportunity to do, things like creative writing workshops with peers and stuff like that. So it's a really, really fun opportunity for that. So definitely check it out, signumuniversity.org/academy. You can send an email to academy@signumu.org for some more information there too. But definitely check out clubs. And then a note that the script discussion for episode 9, as we continue moving forward, what is that even up to then? That's got to be up in Ladros, and that's the is that the Athrobeth episode?
Yeah, I have it right in front of me too. Episode 9. It is. Oh, it's
Andreth and Ignor, right? Yeah.
Right. It's Andreth and Ignor Fall in Love. We actually, this is a first. We were unable to finish scripting out an episode in one session. So this is actually our second session for that.
Session number 2 on episode 9. Well, hey, this is one of the really, one of the handful of human elf romance stories that we get in the Silmarillion. So, worth taking some time over for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So that's coming up this coming weekend, Sunday, February 28th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. So cool. Yeah. And you can get the link to join that session. Of course, it's going to take place on the Signum University Twitch channel. So twitch.tv/SignumU. And you can also go to get the other links from the GoToWebinar link from the page, right? That's post.
Yeah. I wouldn't post it because we've had.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, then we invite the Russian bots to join us. Right. Yeah, of course.
If somebody posts on that sub forum or sends me a private message in the on the forums, I'll get that. Or Marie, who is probably going to act up much more quickly than I will, we'll get you the link to that.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Right. So we can, so you can go to the forums there and you can, and of course also, even if you can't make the live session, any suggestions that you have about episode 9 that you post to the script forum will be taken into account by you guys when you discuss it through. So, cool. Awesome. All right. So tonight we are discussing the frame, and we're kind of thinking in big picture terms about the frame story, but also not just the story, really kind of fleshing out more of the world building. We've kind of touched on this a couple times. We touched on it when we came up with the idea originally back in our pre-season discussions, our pre-production sessions. We touched on it again when we were doing casting. I ended up kind of going off on that for a little bit again there. But definitely more that we need to sort of resolve and decide about what we're going to do with this, even though the frame scenes are relatively short. You know, we don't have a lot, you know, and this is something, you know, Nick, that you have to keep reminding me of as I'm wanting to elaborate the story, that, you know, we have very few scenes to sort of try to move this stuff forward. So anyway, the frame story that we have so far. So we have, we wanted this location right down in Harad, and which we're calling Hobbiton in the south, in the sense that Gandalf in Canus has a similar kind of parallel relationship with the folks down here. So just as he, you know, comes up to Hobbiton, you know, comes and visits the Shire and has established a sort of long-term, even multi-generational relationship with like the Took family, for instance, so too Gandalf in his wanderings into the south. Which we decided he must be going on since he has a name there in Canus, which does not sound like a name given to him in Gondor. That he probably has made contacts down in the south in Harad as well, as he has up in the north. And so we decided we've got a coastal city-state with ancient Black Númenórean roots. And I'm really actually excited to talk about that and kind of the cultural history from the Black Númenóreans and how we sort of work with that. So the queen of the city has 2 teenage sons who have a Boromir-Faramir dynamic, and she worries that neither one is ready to rule their people. This, of course, I really love the way that this enables us to kind of double dip, right? Because I don't know how much, I mean, the day may come when we get a chance to actually do, you know, a season which embraces the stories of young Faramir and young Boromir sometime in the distant future. But it will be, you know, if that happens, it's not going to happen for a very long time. So getting an opportunity to at least kind of indirectly and in parallel touch upon, you know, sort of Gandalf and the wizard's pupil kind of concept, I think is going to be a lot of fun. So I do like that. And of course, we had talked about the 2 sons ultimately as sort of dividing, right? One of whom stays sort of true to the roots, and the other of whom goes over to the dark side there in the sort of spiritual conflict that's happening down there in Harad. And of course, that leads to the third point, the conflict. Something else is in the town. The mouth of Sauron is attempting to revive the cult of Sauron, to return the people to their ancestral worship and allegiance, as we are beginning the process. Sauron, that is beginning the process of essentially reconverting Harad and the East. This is another one of those places where it is so easy to forget about the amount of time that passes in the Third Age, you know? I mean, it's easy to think of the East and South as those places which are under Sauron's control, right? But such a long period of time passes between those times when Sauron is actually running. So, I mean, yes, like he was in control there, like during the War of the Last Alliance. But modern Harad, when he comes and redeclares himself and like, you know, has like the big ribbon cutting ceremony at the new Barad-dûr, right? You know, before the War of the Ring. It's been thousands of years. It's been millennia. So, I mean, you're talking, it is the ancient history of these cultures, you know, that they had any contact with Sauron. And they will have had entire, I mean, even where there is any cultural memory of worshiping Sauron, there's going to be like long and varied, you know, different and varied traditions that will have grown in that time. So the process, this is one of the things that I'm really interested to kind of explore in this frame story, is kind of drawing attention to the uphill battle. Sorry, I'm not quite there yet. The uphill battle that Sauron has in reestablishing himself in these places, and the work that is available for the wizards to do, not only Gandalf, but of course, by extension, the blue wizards, wherever they happen to be. in trying to resist Sauron, but not just resisting Sauron, even trying to defend the native cultures in the East and South that will have grown up organically since Sauron was last, domineering tyrant in those areas. So anyway, so that's the setting. So let's go ahead and talk about the broad picture. Let's talk about Harad in general, how we want to depict this area. So first of all, let me ask before we even start thinking about direct primary world cultural influences, which is an important thing for us to think about as far as how we picture this and conceive this. Geographically, where are we? Where are we picturing Hobbiton of the South in relation, for instance, to Umbar? Are we on the coast south of Umbar? Do we want to be south of Umbar? Marie is thinking, right? Yeah, I'm thinking that too. So really, we're like the coast of Far Harad, basically, is what we're sort of thinking about. Okay, all right, that makes sense to me. Because and here's why I ask that, because I'm thinking that question was actually prompted for me by this slide, sort of potential cultural, sort of conceptions and influences on how we think about this. And particularly, I was thinking about the Phoenicians. I'm thinking, and I don't know if you guys would like this idea, but I'm thinking about establishing a distinction between the culture of Umbar specifically, like the Corsairs and their culture, and the culture of the rest of Harad. The Corsairs specifically, and therefore Umbar, I associate that more with the Phoenicians. So I'm thinking of Umbar more like Carthage, essentially. And being really like, they're the sea power, right? Umbar is the sea power. The Corsairs are the naval power of that whole region. And if there's going to be a sort of predominantly sea trading and also, potentially like, pirate or privateering kind of culture, it's going to be the Corsairs that are going to be doing that stuff, so that the coastal cities of Harad itself, they would probably not have a very widely developed naval culture or seagoing. They would trade with them, right? I mean, they would rely upon trade with the Corsairs, but the Corsairs control the seas down there, so they wouldn't really be established as an independent, So if we distinguish them from the Corsairs, I would sort of imagine them being a coastal city, which is kind of looking inland, and they're not looking to they're not like one of those coastal cities built from the ocean in, right? They're sort of built from the coast out. They would be bringing in trade goods and trading with the Corsairs in the harbor. So there'd be lots of bazaars and things like that down by the docks and stuff, potentially. But I wouldn't think that they would be sort of a focused on having a seafaring kind of culture. What do you guys think of that?
So to kind of go over the kind of sociological and economic consequences of that. Right. I would say that most likely what we're looking at is a city that is near the mouth of a river, but a river that's not navigable by ocean-going vessels. Right. They probably themselves don't manufacture ocean-going vessels, so you won't see like shipyards or anything like that. That's what I was thinking too. Yeah. On the docks, they probably have a very strong fishing trade, though. Coastal fishing. Yep. Yeah. So they would probably, on some level, pay a certain amount of tribute to, especially to the Corsairs, especially if they have a fishing culture. There would be probably
we're not gonna come and steal your boats and yes, right. Like if you want us to I'm thinking if there is a culture in this area which is hostile, it's the Corsairs, right? The Corsairs, because they're the ones. It's not the Haradrim so much. It's the Corsairs that are the traditional enemy of Gondor, right? That's where because you've got the tradition from Castamere, during the Kinstrife, right, or after the during and after the Kinstrife. So they have this whole anti-Gondor culture working, right? So I'm imagining the Corsairs as being, if there is a hostile kind of, nasty, violent culture down here, if there's a set of bad guys in the region, it's the Corsairs, right? So I can imagine these, sort of peaceful, shoreland culture people having to pay protection money, basically, to the Corsairs, essentially, some kind of tribute, which would doubtless be onerous, but something that they could live with, something that they can survive.
Well, they probably also benefit from, so that's why I was saying that they would be on a river that's not navigable by ocean-going vessels, because that puts them in a position where even if they are paying a certain amount of tribute to the Corsairs, that they're still making enough money off of trade with the interior, getting those goods into the interior, which the Corsairs can't really do on this particular river, that it would be worth it to them.
Agreed.
That it would just be considered kind of a, just a cost of doing business, as opposed to they have us under their thumb.
Right. No, that makes sense.
They probably have some leverage as well, like that they have something of value that the Corsairs can't get on their own.
Right. Yeah, I agree. If it were a navigable river, this city would be controlled. Like the Corsairs would have conquered their city probably a long time ago. Yeah.
Well, and also if the city straddles the river, then it would not be cost effective for the Corsairs to try to push through.
Yes.
In that way. So.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Michael Dennis asked a very sensible question. And by the way, Michael, this is my favorite kind of question. Like when I'm trying to brainstorm and think through this stuff, exactly my method is to ask myself yes, no, or either or questions to try to, and then kind of see what the answer is. So Michael says coastal mountains or coastal plains? And I'm immediately thinking plains. Because I'm thinking arable land. I'm thinking one of the pieces of, I think that, for them to be a fairly major food supplier to the Corsairs would be one way for them to have exactly the kind of leverage that you were talking about, Nick, because the Corsairs, if it were merely control of trade routes, right? Then the Corsairs, it might be worth their while to attempt to take over the city and control it. But the Corsairs aren't going to want to come in and farm, right? That's not what they do. It's so they would so they'd leave the farmers alone, the city full of farmers and fishermen alone, because that's boring. They don't want to do that. So they let them go. But of course it does give the Haradrim leverage, because they are, the Corsairs would rely upon the supply of food that they would bring in. So so I'm definitely thinking low-lying, fertile, river delta, area here. Not necessarily a big delta. I'm not thinking Nile Delta or something like that. But as you say, coastal, the river coming out into the sea, and the lowlands around around the river being fertile and arable lands.
So Michael brings up another similar point, is the point of where they're getting their hard goods from.
Right.
Because if they're based in coastal plains, then they're either getting their hard goods from upstream, or they're getting them from the Corsairs. They're getting them from ocean-going trade.
I would say we could have them. I would say they get their metals and stuff like that from upstream. Mostly because I don't want them to be too dependent upon the Corsairs, right? I would want them to be able to have some independence there.
So they have a thriving barge trade going up this river.
Yes. Okay. And they can trade food both directions, right? So they can trade food for metals and wood coming down from the hills, and they can trade food for other more exotic goods that are brought in from all over the place by the corsairs. And that kind of still puts them in a sweet spot. And also, again, the other reason that I'm attracted to the idea of it being a farming area, basically, is that quiet, peaceful town is kind of what I'm thinking here, And so,
what about textiles? Because if they're a coastal place, they don't really have that much need for a ton of farming,
right?
And textiles is a fantastic export, but labor intensive.
Right.
So it's not something that the Corsairs necessarily want to come in and take over, because cotton, not fun.
Right.
But or even flax for that matter.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking something more along the line. Yeah, linen is what I was kind of picturing rather than cotton. But yeah. I mean, you're right that's a wonderful input, and that would also give the people of the town not only that kind of farmer feel, but also like manufacturer element as well. They would be crafts people as well, right? There would be, they would be producing things as well as growing things. And it also gives us an excuse for extravagant costuming, right? I mean, if they are the center of a textile trade, we can go full Black Panther, in like the colorful textile varieties and things. Sure.
Marie's going to be happy that there's going to be. Marie's going to be happy that there's going to be like piles of fabric.
Yep. Right. Karina says, "Did somebody say costuming?" Yeah. No, I mean we can go all out with fabrics then if we're. But yeah, it gives them. I mean, I do like because then we can have there be, again, not just farming. So it's we're not then just imagining a kind of a crude. Farming and fishing village kind of place, but a much more sophisticated, with, artisans and artists, there as well. So, with dyers and, tailors. And so that the people who are working with fabrics and then therefore exporting, not just raw textiles, but, tailored clothes and things like that. Yeah. No, that's good. I like it. So, I mean, it doesn't mean they'd be unlikely to be doing too much metalworking because they'd be importing all the metals. So, I mean, they could maybe be doing some of that, but it certainly wouldn't be their signature.
Right.
And I would also think that this is a pretty good formula for a peaceful city-state. They're not going to have nor need a sort of, robust military history. They're not going to need to establish, Yeah,
if this city is millennia old, one would imagine that they already have a good, solid wall structure around the city. They probably have, if the river isn't navigable by ocean-going vessels, then they probably also have gates for the river itself, so that they can control that trade.
Yeah, a controlled port, right? Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So the potentate gets a cut, their deserved cut, of course.
Right. Right.
Of that. As far as a standing army, as Marie's asking, they have to have some, I'd imagine. But it would be more
guards, guards and sentries, but not really standing army exactly. I wouldn't think.
Like sort of a for show, kind of more bureaucratic organization. But the only one that's it's not up for challenging the Corsairs or menacing neighbors proactively, and that presumably that'll be one of the changes that we'll see as they fall under the influence of Sauron, right?
Well, we'll see levies probably. Like this city is probably going to provide levies from their farmers,
right,
and whatnot when they go to war.
Yes, yes, and I would think that their whole military tradition could well be essentially focused on defending their city. Like there would have been times when they would have been at war as other, more aggressive lands from the inside. There would certainly have been, a robust history of conflict with the Corsairs at various points. But it would seem to me very plausible to have their military history be primarily just about defending. So they can have walls, and they would have a tradition of guards and sentries. I mean, if you're going to have walls, you will probably want people on the walls, keeping an eye out and preparing to defend them at need.
And you need toll collectors.
And guards to guard the tolls that you collect. So yes, there would be those kinds of people. But yeah,
I could imagine them. I could imagine them having a very robust and active police force.
Right. Right, especially with the large trade bazaars and things.
Depicted.
Wait, sorry?
Yes.
Whom we've already
depicted.
Well, there we go. Yeah, there we go.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
I wonder. I like the idea of them being. I wonder. I wonder if we can sort of play up the idea that maybe they're like perfectly maybe there's something. There's some feature of the geography that makes in addition to like also having walls that they've built, but there being features of the geography that make them kind of like it would be very difficult for someone, but especially the Corsairs, to conquer them.
Michael's suggestion
Yeah,
and then kind of get away with not having to have an army. Like there's sort of a blessing of being like in a good spot, almost a little like very, very minor parallel with Gondolin, being kind of, they're not hidden, but they're like very easily defended, and so they can afford to not be militaristic.
Yeah, so Michael was suggesting, he liked the idea of having like a promontory that goes out into the sea. So if one bank of the river basically is higher and cliff faced to the ocean, so that it's almost inaccessible from there, and they can have a keep. There can
that's where the keep. Yeah.
That's where the the
palace is.
The palace, the queen is up there. So you'd have like much more significant, and this is where you would get the sense of ancient wars that have been, right? At some point they felt the need to build a fortress up on this promontory that people could retreat into at time of need. There could be an outer wall. There could also be a smaller outer wall around sort of the larger city, or the larger kind of area, but then you have the larger area up there. So it's pretty clearly defensible, and from there, they can also, control the harbor from a high point as well, and that kind of defensive position would certainly give pause to purely seaborne invaders. Could certainly make things difficult. And so we can I think we can kind of have that both ways. Have that kind of because it doesn't have to be like 300 feet high. I mean the cliffs can be like 20 or 30 feet above the water.
20 feet up is I mean,
right, with walls on top. Yeah.
When you were over in England, did you ever get a chance to go to the Tower of London?
Oh yeah.
It's not that tall.
It's not. No.
Yet it dominated the landscape at the time.
Right, especially from the river. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. No, I agree. That I think could work really, really well, and give them security, which confers like the faintest touch of complacency to their culture. Again, very Hobbiton of the South, right? They've been comfortable for so long that they have come to think that it is, the right of all sensible folk. Having that kind of an element of their culture makes sense. And if they're like that, I mean, if they're wealthy enough to not be concerned about, a lean season, or where they're if they're going to be able to make it through, but also they're not a glaring target and worried about being invaded by stronger neighbors. I think it's fairly easy to imagine a city-state like this being in a fairly cozy kind of position. Yeah. Okay, sure, good.
I'm glad for the reminder that you sort of saying hops into the South. I'm thinking like maybe there should be not so subtle and maybe some subtle like sort of parallel. Like I wonder if their police force should kind of resemble sort of the idea like the bounders,
like the sheriffs and the bounders. Yeah. You've got the bounders who are like the guards on the wall, and the sheriffs who patrol the bazaars, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, probably should be more substantial and a little better organized, but it should feel similar in the sense that it kind of feels like maybe you don't really need it, and it's kind of just there to have just for show, just to have the semblance that there's some kind of government functioning.
Right. That a certain percentage anyway of the guards or men-at-arms there in the city joined the guards for the sake of knowing where the best beer is, basically. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And like I imagine that there's a lot of kind of, as far as the trade within the city, there's kind of a lot of happy anarchy going on in there. Like nobody really cares what you're selling your cloth for, or what it's just not of interest. The queen or potentate is really only interested on what's coming in and out.
Right. Yeah. No, I think this is a good so let's get back to the primary world influences. We've established a bunch of things here. There are several different options that you guys were suggesting. Potential Arabic influences. We did talk about, we talked about wanting to avoid any specifically Muslim references. But hang on a second, latitude, where are we? We're south, right? So we're going to be equatorial, basically. Inland, so we're talking about right inland is going to be mountains where they're going to be able to get there. But I would think to the inland and to the north can be desert, right? So we can, or more Saharan. So that's what, there can be more like sub-Saharan Africa, like northern sub-Saharan Africa, I'm thinking like the savannah, basically, to the north of inland and north of them. Or need it be desert? Would we have camels? Would we want camel trains coming in from that direction to their bazaars, or?
It depends. Like Visa says, we can be anywhere you want to be.
Right.
Right.
This unsponsored plug brought to you by yes. Yeah, it could be.
Karita wants cool hats.
Cool hats. Okay, I agree. Karita, I agree with you. Karita says, I want pleats, I want embroidery, I want cool hats. It needs to be a feast for the eyes. The episodes should come with a migraine warning. That's how bright I want the colors. Yeah, no, Karina, when I mentioned Black Panther, I was thinking of the ceremonial scene when they do the fight duels on the cliffside.
On the improbable cliff. Yes.
On the improbable cliff with all of the different tribes in their amazing, splendid colors and that's the scene I was picturing in my head when I said that. So yeah, exactly that. That's it. I'm glad we're on the same page here, Karina. That's just it. That will be excellent.
Incan and Aztec influence would be really, really interesting in that kind of environment as well. So the Incans had a very, very different way of dealing with the heat than people from the more Arab and African regions did. I think that has to do with humidity, though. because the people in Mesoamerica were living with much more humidity, and so they kind of went for like as little as possible. Whereas in the dry heat of the the near the Mediterranean,
that's
you go for those like loose flowing,
right?
Just because like that's a great way to keep cool in those circumstances. So it depends on what our environment looks like.
Right. I think. Well, of course, it's hard to avoid. I mean, we all know the vaguely Earth geography parallel that Tolkien was establishing in Middle-earth, and again, it's vague. Like, we don't have to stick with that. Like, just because he was thinking of, the parts of Middle-earth where the story takes place as vaguely, Europe and Western Asia, and then, Harad and everything as vaguely Middle Eastern and African direction. We don't have to keep everything the northwest of the old world, as he says. So it is possible for us to think more in terms of American equatorial, as you suggest, Nick, rather than Middle Eastern. But of course,
you have to change the climate.
We would have to change the climate very significantly, and I find I don't really want to. I would rather keep Harad more like Northern Africa than more like, Central America, basically.
The food's probably amazing.
Yeah. Well, in this city? Oh, yeah. No, they've got to have a big food culture, too. So, Karita, that's the other thing that I insist upon. If you want bright colors and amazing costuming, I want, food stalls in the bazaar, right? Like amazing food stalls. This has got to be one of the things that keeps Gandalf coming back, right? To this place.
I mean, does Gandalf have like a favorite hookah bar that he frequents, or
who knows? He would, right? I mean, like, why would Gandalf not have a favorite hookah bar? And that is a visual image that I never contemplated, but now just
need.
Yeah. I mean, again, like, would that not happen? Of course that would happen. Like, yeah. No, certainly. Gandalf with a hookah never once crossed my brain, but now it is there forever. So there we are. Yeah. No, I agree, Karita. Tea stalls, meat stalls, bread stalls. Absolutely. Yes. Seafood. Remember, we're coastal, right? So we've got, wonderful fish and all kinds of things. So, yep. The food is going to be great. Yeah.
Another parallel with the Shire.
Yeah, another parallel with the Shire. Yes, lots of
food culture.
Yes. Lots of very very different comfort foods there in the South than they have in Hobbiton, but similar quantities. Absolutely. Okay, so Michael's asking an excellent question. Are we considering a monsoon climate? It would depend on how tall the mountains are. Right. If we get, like, as you were, Michael, I think you were also talking about whether we should be imagining like a rain shadow of these mountains. I think I wasn't imagining mountains quite so high. I was just thinking of uplands where there could be mines, essentially.
Yeah. And not to mention that would create some problems as far as how consistently you could navigate the river by barge.
Right.
Because it, monsoons means rapids.
Right.
And, especially if this river is essentially flowing through the streets of the city, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I think and also my overall feel of this city is basically even keel. Like, I wouldn't want there to be radical shifts in season, like radical dry season, radical wet season, the river going up and down by 5 feet or whatever. Doesn't feel right to me. Like it like this should be like a very even keel town. Like, seasons change and different stuff comes and goes, and they have their own different times, but that it's this sense of like unchangingness season by season, year by year seems to me because that's what we want to be damaging with the Mouth of Sauron, right? We want to have, this is the alien impact of the arrival or the re-arrival after a very long time absent of the cult of Sauron, needs to feel like a tragic disruption, right? Like this culture which has been undisturbed for as long as they can remember, and certainly in living memory, and not just living memory, but even their records for centuries potentially could have been largely peaceful, largely unchanging. So yes, I wouldn't want it very dynamic in almost any way, including climate, essentially.
It sounds very much like the Shire.
Yeah.
That's a key feature of the Shire is its unchangingness.
Yes. Yeah. Michael, yeah, something like the climate perhaps of coastal Morocco. I think that could, I don't know coastal Morocco very well. I've never been there. But from what I know, that seems to me like it would fit. It certainly would fit around the latitude that we're talking about. The latitude we're talking about might even be a little bit south of there. But if it's coastal, it would be easy to get to, even if it were fairly far down. But like I said, vaguely equatorial is latitude-wise what I'm thinking. Yeah, and we know that folks go down further than that, where the stars are strange, right? So we know that there is southern hemisphere travel. It's Aragorn who's been down where the stars are strange, right? But if Aragorn's been there, I bet you Gandalf has too. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So other things for again, thinking back to the influences and stuff, as far as like architectural styles and things like that. I'm thinking solid walls, fortress on the promontory, but other than that, I don't know how to describe what I'm picturing. How much sort of would the houses as you're looking over the city, would that mostly be like clay or brick houses, tile roofs kind of things?
We could do a lot of, so Michael is suggesting mud bricks,
right,
or shellfish-based concrete. We could also consider adobe, some sort of adobe style dwellings, if we wanted to kind of mix things up, and get away from a purely, like, have it look a little bit different from what you'd see in say,
like North
Morocco.
Africa, right? Yeah, exactly. Right.
I love the tiered gardens idea, Karita.
Gardens. Yes, again with the Shire parallels, right? It should be a city where gardeners are held in high honor, right? Definitely.
Yeah, I live in a very hilly area, and so I see tiered gardens in my future. Definitely, I've already done some of that for my parents. So
nice. Yes, good. Agreed. And the gardens in the palace should be splendid. I suppose it would be too much to have Gandalf commenting on how bright their garden looks when he's there, but some comment along those lines I would think would be welcome.
Maybe we should do it.
Karita's mentions of trellis work and breezeways and courtyards. There should be, because think about it, there's no AC in this culture. There's a lot of open
breezeways,
open building, like places where, like, these courtyards that are covered, right, to keep the sun off, so you have shade, but they're completely open so that some wind can go through.
Right. Yeah. Cool. No, I like this. I like this a lot. I think that this is this is picking up on a lot. So let's think about other cultural elements. Now let's come back to Black Númenórean, because being a coastal city on a location like this, right? The Númenóreans would have been all over this, right? They would have totally founded this city, no question, or conquered this city and built there. It has ancient Númenórean roots.
So.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Here we go. The walls around the city, at least the inner ward. Mm-hmm. Okay. There should be an inner ward of the city, which has the original ancient walls of the city that existed there, built on the river.
Okay.
Okay. And then the palace itself should have some Númenórean tones to it. Mm-hmm. It should reflect the idea of that's where the Númenórean lord built their palace up there.
Maybe the inner, like the harbor bazaar, is basically what is inside what was. You can still see the ruins of the old wall. So and it would be, of course, a very, very old wall. Like we're talking something like 1.5 to 2 times as old as Hadrian's Wall, basically. We're talking about a very old wall.
Right. And so that wall is built out of like old mud brick, like fired mud brick.
Yeah.
Right. The keep is built out of stone, because you remember the Númenóreans, they have this thriving global trade going on.
Right.
It's nothing for them to bring in stone to build this structure with. And then the outer wall reflects the more modern structure that they have now, because they've eventually, in the past few thousand years, have had to build
they've grown
a wall that encompasses more of the city.
Yeah, because of course the Númenóreans, though they would not have been settling and expanding in this place. They were, they established a strong place there, and they exploited the natural resources from that area like they did all over the place. Exploiting natural resources was one of their specialties even before they went bad. Or rather, before they went worse, I guess you could say. But yeah, no, I agree. So that they will have surrounded the ancient Númenórean, like the city would have surrounded thoroughly the ancient Númenórean remnants. But let's think more about those Númenóreans. No, sorry. Go ahead, Nick.
Well, I was just saying that the original city can have been like a smaller but still important city, ancient city. Mm-hmm. Like original River Valley civilization, ancient, right?
Okay. Like pre-Númenórean, like first age.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Or like late first age, early second age. Yeah. With no mind to what's going on in Beleriand whatsoever. Right. Then the Númenóreans show up, they take over, they build their fortifications and whatnot. That kind of beef up the city's strategic importance, and then eventually, as things continue to spread out, they're kind of forced to build walls around the outer city. Right.
Yep. No, that works for me. That makes sense. And it's actually interesting. It establishes historically the city as like their ancient and historical culture is of like river valley based land agrarian culture, which has a complicated history with people who come in over the sea, with like a more powerful dominant culture that comes from the sea. First with the Númenóreans, and then with the Corsairs later on. Okay. Yes. Good. Now, about the blackness of the Black Númenórean history, that is to say, to what extent should there be remnants of the fallen Númenórean culture. Like, we know that the areas in the south are where the King's Men were establishing their outposts. But what should be the heritage of the Númenóreans? Like, first of all, it's been over 3,000 years, right? So they needn't have the same degree of Númenórean identity and memory as Gondor does, for instance. It needn't be as central to their culture as it is to Gondor. Okay, I guess there's another thing we might as well bring in at the same time, which is Sauron, right? What is the history of this city with Sauron? How, if at all, is Sauron remembered? And how, if at all, are the King's Men, slavers, human sacrificing subset of Númenóreans remembered? Because we could go either way with this.
And what story do they tell about what happened?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to add a related question from the YouTube chat from Keaton Anderson. Is like, do we see, is there a decline in things like technology and culture over time as well? Because it's interesting because there's these sort of competing or the multiple sort of dynamics at play. There's the corruption of Númenórean culture, but then there's also like just over time the waning of Númenórean culture.
Yes,
right.
And so like to the extent that the black Númenórean stuff goes away, things get better. But like sort of the kernel of like classic true Númenórean culture was probably good, and as that wanes, maybe things get a little more backward or worse or rustic.
What if the fortress had been a Númenórean construction? So, which of course would also greatly help these people to fend off the Corsairs. If the fortress on the promontory is like Orthanc, basically, it's like little mini Minas Tirith with built with Númenórean technology, essentially.
So, to kind of, in the story so far, there have been a few developments that have kind of come out of that. And, of course, these aren't, as always, these aren't unchangeable, but to kind of give you an idea of the direction that we've been going, is that there was a very, very heavy religious worship of Sauron in the city at some time in the quite distant past.
Yes.
Right.
So there's not been an active Sauronic presence since the last alliance, basically.
The temple, right. They were loyal during the last alliance, but they haven't. Once he disappeared, there's been no influence whatsoever, because the Nazgul themselves have not expressed their influence that far out.
Right.
There was a temple to Sauron in the city. It has since fallen to disrepair. People steal the stones to help in the repair or building of their own whatchamacallits, their own homes and whatnot. But it would have been quite a large and imposing structure on the outskirts of the city, possibly on the far end of the city, away from this promontory, so that we can see it. So that there can be shots where we can see it off in the distance.
Right.
Which would be pretty cool.
That would be pretty cool.
During the course of the story so far, the mouth of Sauron comes to the queen, asking for permission to rebuild the temple, because the worship of the cult of Sauron has been kind of on the rise, and and of course this brings in money. This brings in this brings in either laborers or uses labor that's already existing, and they have more money, so everybody kind of benefits. Not to mention, like I said, there has been kind of this upswell of the cult of Sauron in the area. So the queen, even though she's not thrilled with the idea of foreign influence, kind of can sense the wind and doesn't say no.
And what about Dave? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what if like maybe at least within like the upper echelons, what if this like cult of Sauron is kind of viewed as like a fringe cult of weirdos that no one takes seriously? Yep.
Right.
In the very first episode, we feature a street preacher who comes up again a couple more times, and the street preacher is kind of tolerated, the way street preachers often are, and but like the people are listening,
right?
But the the upper echelons of society, as you say, aren't like, thus far they've been relatively harmless.
Right. Right. So here's my question. What are the cultural traditions surrounding the memory of the worship of Sauron? So on the one hand, again, 3,000 years, right? We are almost incalculably removed from the time when they actually worshiped the real Sauron, which means there are several options. One very logical option is that they've utterly forgotten Sauron and have no record of ever having, like, there's no memory in their society at all of ever having worshipped him. That would be perfectly sensible. I mean, that would be, so much time has passed. That would be very possible if we wanted to make it a completely new thing. But, Nick, if there's still a temple, if there's an ancient temple, right, that would help people to remember, right? I mean, they have this constant reminder of this old religion that was. But I think it would be fun. Wouldn't it be fun if their stories and traditions about what the worship of Sauron was have, like, greatly changed over time? You know, maybe they don't retain a very clear memory of what the worship of Sauron was like at all. Maybe even the stories about Sauron have, like, kind of morphed until, like, in their memory, and again, it would be dim, like there's no living worship of Sauron. So there's no living tradition of the worship of Sauron. They would respect the temple as a monument to the ancient history of their town, and there would still be maybe some stories and legends associated with that temple and with the worship that took place in it. But of course, the actual, like, the stories and legends that they still retain about he who was worshipped here, and about the god that was worshipped there, and about his, could be widely removed from the actual history, right? Yeah. I mean, I think it would be kind of fun if they had all of these things that would sound actually comical from the point of view of people who know who Sauron was, right? Yeah. If they could have twisted those into, like, over the centuries, as their society became more and more settled in their ways and peaceful, that they they ceased to tell warlike story. I mean, they would certainly not remember that there was anything to do with, like, human sacrifice or orcs or anything like that. And there would be, so I'm trying to think, like, there would be some grain, like some element of the Sauron worship that would have, like, been retained, even if twisted into some form. Like, what would be the thread that they might have held on to?
So there's a few things that are involved in all this, and of course, optimally, and I don't think we have time to do this now, but optimally, we'd want to plan out the entire history of this particular city, right, from beginning to end, so we could see what other cultural influences did anybody else come in and take over the city from the original Black not the original, but from the Black Numenorian elites that were there before. That's my next big question. Well, I'll come back to that in a minute. Right. And of course, as Michael pointed out, the level of literacy in the town makes a tremendous difference. And if this is a thriving trade culture, I would say that for the time period that we're talking about, the literacy might be quite high, actually. If you're talking about people who know how to, put together a balance sheet and a P&L report, you got to have literacy to do that, right?
Right.
So another issue is what did people see Sauron as originally, or the last time during the War of the Last Alliance? Because I'd be willing to bet that Sauron was saying, help us throw off your Gondorian oppressors.
Well, and the Númenórean yoke specifically, because that's a little spoiler on the other thing that I wanted to talk about, which is, remember, the Black Númenórean culture and the Sauron culture were at war. Like, yes, Sauron came and took over the Númenórean culture at the end, but his supporters back in Middle-earth weren't part of that. That was a solo operation by Sauron, right? He would have been, prior to Ar-Pharazôn's landing in Middle-earth, in Umbar and his defeat of Sauron, there would have been a significant, the Númenóreans would have been enemy number one. Right. So if there's a yoke that was being thrown off of these people, it would have been the Black Númenórean yoke that was being thrown off. Right. So and if there is a big temple of Sauron here, then you've got to think that at least by the end of the Second Age, the Númenórean domination, right, the cultural domination of this city and area by the Númenóreans would have been overtaken by the Sauronic influence, which was definitely in opposition to the Númenórean one.
So what I imagine, and I feel like the Queen is kind of doing something very similar here. What I imagine is that the Númenórean, Black Númenórean lords of the city at the time recognized the direction of the wind and made a complete 180 shift and joined and established the cult of Sauron.
They defected, right.
And so the Queen isn't doing that per se, but she's sensing the direction of the wind, and so because she knows that Sauron's big move is to set himself up as the liberator, right? Because we know our history,
right?
At least she knows the history of of the ages of her city and her house's rule there.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting. So Joe was suggesting that, of course, some of their stories and legends could be essentially of Anatar, giver of gifts, like that aspect of Sauron could be the element that they remember. Certainly what would have been happening in the War of the Last Alliance would have been him bringing in his human armies to march alongside his orc armies. And as Tolkien discusses in some of his later post-Lord of the Rings writing, if you're going to do that, if you're going to bring in an army of humans and convince them that it's perfectly copacetic to, pal up with orcs and consider them your colleagues, you've got to do some work. Like, you've got to, a culture like this, like if the culture we've just been describing, right? I mean, if they were, levied as troops for Sauron's army from afar, and they just marched up, and then they're, in the midst of like these orc slave drivers, they're going to be like, we're out of here. These are not our allies. Like, we're going back and fording up in our walls. So Tolkien described this process of moral corruption, that this kind of campaign of moral corruption that he undertook in order to bring these human cultures to morally corrupt them to a point where they were okay. They didn't care about like the horrible things that orcs were and the horrible things that orcs did. So
what I would say is that the cult of Sauron is a driving force behind that, because you can get people to do a lot of stuff under the aspect of religious fervor, right? As far as the orcs, I would say that the people in the South probably believe that Sauron has created the orcs as like automatons, right? Like, they're not deconstructed elves.
Right.
And so they're just soldiers that serve a purpose. They're not meant to like overflow the earth. It's just a means to an end that Sauron has needed in order to pursue his goal.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So if they remember Anatar is not the name he would have gone by down here, but if they have some kind of memory of Sauron as giver of gifts, you know, they've forgotten. I said, I mean, again, 3,000 years is a lot of cultural forgetting, right? So they don't retain the memory of, they don't retain the legends of Sauron the tyrant slave driver who, who brought them in on the side of the orcs in the Battle of the Last Alliance. There are two reasons why I am interested in having essentially happy, cheerful, benevolent, warm, fuzzy, quasi-religious traditions retained in their culture surrounding Sauron and the worship of Sauron. One is that I think it's an interesting way to kind of complicate the idea that so many people have. And of course, like Tolkien's works do little to explicitly contradict this kind of concept. Basically, of like the peoples in Rhûn and Harad, just like being evil cultures that are just waiting to enlist in Sauron's armies as soon as he pops up again, right? And like, yes, of course, we know that they were connected to Sauron and that they would have worshipped the cult of Sauron in ages past. But we're talking about a lot of ages. And so to show an example of what that, how widely... So when we talk about like the reconversion of this city to the cult of Sauron at the end, this is not just like, and these people who were always ready to his hand go back to the worship of the Dark Lord. We need to emphasize the kind of tragedy that is, right? And the kind of horrible, cultural, carpet bombing that Sauron has to effect in order to bring that about. And so that's one thing that I think is sort of it. But again, another thing is just to also make more complicated and also easier, because again, we don't have much time, right? So we can't really show the number of total scenes we have in the frame over the season is very few. So if we want to show these people, these wonderful, peaceful, happy Hobbiton of the South culture that we've been describing, choose en masse to go over to Sauron, right? And to welcome the mouth of Sauron. One way to make that plausible is if they have this connection which can be exploited, right? They already have warm, fuzzy associations with Sauron, not because they have warm, fuzzy associations about Sauron, the slave driver and human sacrificer, but because that's not what they're willing to listen to the mouth of Sauron because there are these positive associations with Sauron. Yes. That's why I'm thinking about this kind of the cheerful, happy cult of Sauron tradition that still exists. And again, not a positive cult, like it's not an active religious cult in the city anymore, but they would know the name and they would have positive associations with the name. Nick, picking back up on your suggestion about the Númenóreans, right? That the remnant of the Númenóreans who were still living in this city when the conflict between when Sauron goes back to Númenor, basically, right? You were talking about the defection of like that they would kind of defect over to Sauron's side and begin the worship of Sauron. They would have then built the temple. And if the Númenóreans built the temple, that explains why it's still there 3,000 years later, right? So what if it's not the fortress on the hill that is the Númenórean construction? What if it's only the temple? What if the temple is the single greatest remaining monument of the lost Númenórean technology that they can't replicate anymore? So that the fortress itself can still be strong, but more modern and crude, again, I can still imagine. I mean, the Numenorians would have built defenses and would have done it really well, so that still works for me. But
I like the idea of the opposing forces, right?
Yes.
From across the city.
Yep.
Because the temple was built for the people, right? They didn't attach it to their own dwelling.
No.
Because they don't actually want the people from the Church of Sauron, which are basically like the. You remember did you ever see the Hunt for Red October? I hope.
Yes. Yeah. Been a while, but
yes. Remember there's a on board the Soviet submarine. There's a political officer, right? Mm-hmm. And I imagine that the people in the government of the city would kind of feel the same way towards the people running the Church of Sauron as these Russian naval officers felt towards the political officer. Like, yeah, just do your thing over there. We're just happy to run our city, but
Right. And of course, as the active worship of the cult of Sauron declined over centuries and centuries, it has become it's just a monument. And in their eyes, it is a monument of the ancient glory of their city, right? And again, this is why they have warm and fuzzy associations. Gandalf is going to eventually be asking them to forswear Sauron, right? He's going to be trying to show them, look, the worship of Sauron is not what you think, right? It is not what you think. This is you need to resist this. You need to reject Sauron. That's gonna, even though they don't worship Sauron anymore, even though that's not active in any way, the Temple of Sauron is like this core to the identity, the historical memory of their city. It would be like asking the people of Minas Tirith to reject the Numenorian heritage, basically. They feel towards Sauron not exactly the same way as the people of Minas Tirith feel towards Elendil, but almost like. I mean, it would be this. Yeah. It's not an exact parallel, but again, that kind of core to their identity kind of thing.
What if the Temple of Sauron still plays a role in civic life, like kind of a like mundane, benign? They have like a community center.
A community center.
An annual like food drive,
like festivals and things. Like yeah, sure. I'm imagining the culture of the city as being largely secular. Like I don't think I certainly don't think they would have a like queen as priestess or goddess kind of culture. I don't think, which is reminding me, I think, to probably advance the slide. Yeah. We've already talked about all this stuff basically. Yeah, so I would definitely not see that. I see them as being primarily secular. But yeah, Dave, imagining like every year, maybe on like multiple occasions,
Sauron's
birthday celebration, right? They gather. I mean, they could even have like a memorial feast remembering like the giver of gifts, right? When they all give presents to each other. It's like the Christmas of Harad, right?
It would be fantastic if they don't remember that Sauron and Anatar are the same person.
Yeah, good.
Anatar is like the secular Santa Claus on Christmas.
There you go.
Right?
Yes.
And they like carry his like statue his paper mache statue through the streets.
Yep. Anatar rides in with a camel train to bring presents for all the boys and girls.
Right. and every year, like the street preachers are out there like, keep Sauron in Christmas, right?
And of course, what that also means is it puts Gandalf in a position where he's running around telling everyone to give up Christmas.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, he's like, it would be a real blow to their culture.
People are like, what's wrong with you?
It's exactly. Why do you hate Santa Claus? This guy is.
Right.
Yeah.
So I grew up around people who were very anti-Halloween.
Okay. Yep.
Right.
Yep. Been there.
This is the thing. Right.
Yep, been there.
And that's not a discussion I'm interested in having right now.
That's
but
okay.
Telling people why you don't celebrate Halloween gets you these super weird looks.
Yep.
Like you're kidding.
Yep.
You're clearly crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. No one gives up their celebrations, right, Marie?
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. Like it's, and this is, of course, obviously something that the Mouth of Sauron, being a cunning politician, could very easily use, right? And again, this is what Gandalf is seeing, right? What we have to be dramatizing in the frame, because again, we have so little time. We can't be depicting, like he's not going to take them from like beautiful, peaceful, charming city in episode 1 to, gore covered priests sacrificing children in episode 13, right? That's not what's going to happen. What we're going to be seeing is the thin edge of the wedge, right? It's the beginning, the first steps of the Mouth of Sauron manipulating and taking advantage of local culture and establishing the first steps, which Gandalf knows. He knows where this is going, right? He sees where this is heading and is very concerned about this, but it's not going to be obvious to anybody else. And he's going to look like the crazy person.
So Marie brings up something that we've been kind of like leading up towards, is having the son, the younger son in this case, the Faramir parallel, making the same decision that his ancestors made many, many years ago, to instead of merely tolerate the cult of Sauron as the Queen has, that there's a coup, and he, in order to retain power, embraces the cult of. He goes full Constantine, right?
Right. Right. Okay, so we have, and I haven't gotten that far up in the frame. It's the Faramir brother that turns bad in the end. Okay, so
yeah, we wanted to like just mirror the whole thing, right? Like just turn the whole thing around.
Nice, I like it. Okay.
By the way, I like the idea of the cult of Sauron coup. That their whole thing be. I think part of their thing should be something about trying to preserve their heritage and their culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that Gandalf and his faction should be perceived as cultural encroachment from Gondor.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Very much. And in fact, one thing that I would really like to do is, because we're going to have as you guys wanted the other brother to flee with Gandalf. Yeah. Right. He's going to be just the right age to be kind of a Palamedes figure in Gondor when Thorondor is there, and so we can do like some. I would love to, over the next few seasons, gather a bunch of warriors in Minas Tirith so that he can have like some Arthurian round table stories.
Right. So. Right. Yeah. Right, exactly. No, it would be really fun to have.
What did I say, Thorondor?
Yeah, well, it would be a little bit more dramatic if Thorondor came.
Yeah, well, he's staring over your shoulder, so I
guess, exactly right. You gotta watch Thorondor there. Yeah, I went with my ominous Númenorian theme background for this discussion here, because I was thinking of Black Númenorians. Yes. No, I love the idea of having the older brother involved in the Thorongil story, and this answers. Michael's question. Was it Michael's question? Yes.
How many generations elapsed?
Yeah. How many generations elapsed between this and the War of the Ring? 1, basically, right?
Well, 1 Númenorian.
Well, yeah. I don't mean it's in the same. I mean, one like. This is. What are our
60
dates?
Years.
Marie, I always need help with the dates. So we're less than 70 years, right? Okay, right, yeah. So, so it is the grandchildren of the young brother, right? The Sauron sympathizer brother. It's his grandchildren who are going to fight in the War of the Ring, basically. Okay, so 1 to 2 generations, basically. Okay, yeah. So that gives us some time, right, to move from this is, you know, a political movement which has strong ties to our history, and some changes are probably going to come along with it, but, you know, it's probably not going to be that big a deal to, you know.
The barges will run on time.
The barges will run on time. Yes, they will. Yes, they will. Yep. I think that could definitely work. Again, especially under the active supervision of the Cult of Sauron to be, you know, they're going to have a whole program, and being, you know, ultimately directed by Sauron and the Nazgul. This is, you know, they're all about the multi-generational campaign, you know, in bringing this together. Sauron needn't be in a hurry about this kind of thing. Now, the more about so I'm looking back over the questions on this slide, and I've hit upon one we didn't answer. More about the government of about the Queen and her role here. Again, I'm not thinking. I think for the same reasons that I wasn't thinking of her as a kind of religious figure at all. For that reason, I think I was not thinking of her as a sort of Eastern potentate kind of figure. I'm thinking of her as not exactly democratic either. I mean, her line could be hereditary.
Head bureaucrat.
Yeah, but have her be very much the sort of, well, again, Shire-like, right? She's not quite mayor, you know, she's not quite Flower Dumpling, but she's closer to the Will Whitfoot end of the political spectrum than she is to, you know, the Sultan end of the political spectrum.
Is she like a more competent Master of Lake Town figure, maybe?
Yeah, I don't think we want her to be. I feel resistant to having her be actually democratically elected. Which
well, I mean, I don't remember there being any evidence that the Master of Lake Town.
Well, no, and he does say we've always chosen our leaders among.
Okay.
So, right. But I don't think it's democracy. I think it's probably merchant oligarchy, but
yes.
In Lake Town, that is. But yes. But anyway, but the reason I want heredity is for two reasons. One, because I want that as a link to the past. Right. I want, you know, her to feel like them to feel that it is their family's tradition, even if
Master
it's
Buckland.
Yeah. And also the other reason that I want it to be hereditary is that I want there to be, it feels like it'll make more sense if the son has more of a presumption of inheritance,
yes.
right? That's an established thing. So
we've been assuming that. So Master Buckland or the old Took, you know, the Thane.
The Thane, yeah.
The Shire, those are good examples.
Yep. Yeah. Again, more Shire-like in the kind of hands-off governmental. I mean, they would need to have somebody who oversees, you know, like the tax collection and the you know, I mean, like that's you need bureaucracy to run a port like that, you know, right. And so she would be overseeing that. But it would I could almost imagine her position being one almost more like public servant than ruler, really. And she would be respected among the people because she does the work, you know, and she, you know, right. She and her people are making sure, because nobody wants to do that. You know, nobody wants to be in charge of, you know, levying the tolls and you know, so she's
repairing roads and
exactly
and docks and all that stuff. Yeah.
But as far as ruling, you know, as far as like making laws, and you know, they can have like a council of elders who, you know, is involved with, you know, judicial and legislative functions of the city. She wouldn't be in charge of either the judicial or the legislative functions of the city, I wouldn't necessarily think. She might have a say, but I wouldn't see her as like a central kind of power in that way. But of course, this could be another way. And this could be a lever that the Mouth of Sauron would use with younger brother, right? To kind of restore the glory of their, like, basically he could be being fed like, yes, your line descends from the ancient days, but of course your ancestors ruled with power in this city, where you are, but a tax collector.
Right. Let's say that the city council is 100% against the cult of Sauron because it's giving the people power, right? Because they're getting really loud, right? And so the son will then be seen as a revolutionary figure, right? Who wipes out the council. His mother's off the table, so he comes to power now with executive and legislative authority.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Where he didn't have that before.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, and of course not unknown, right? To sort of ride a sort of a popular revolt to a position of dictatorial authority. So yeah. So he establishes essentially, so on the one hand, he's motivated essentially to reestablish a kind of more formal aristocracy. Like, he should be the kind of strong ruler that his ancestors always were. And yet this is also a popular revolt. As the people people who love Santa Claus are embracing Sauron, basically,
right.
And following, because Sauron is the pro Christmas,
right. faction. And this is why the Queen has been tolerating the cult of Sauron this whole time, because it's not worth pitting.
Right, antagonizing
it's just
the
not
people.
Worth pitting yourself against that.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right. And she would not believe that they would come to conflict. Right. I mean, because
Sauron's not back.
Right.
The mouth of Sauron's appearance is the first evidence that he's right. back. And is she really sure that he's back just because this lady shows up?
And their society has been, she doesn't think that, I mean, she can't imagine the people turning against her and, staging a coup. Like, the people aren't going to do that. Like, everyone's happy there in the city. And it's not going to be until through the manipulation of the mouth of Sauron and he can even use Gandalf, essentially. Like, basically, Gandalf is the figure which the mouth of Sauron uses to mobilize the people, right? Because he's now come in and he's corrupted he's this foreign influence, this foreign advisor who has come in and corrupted the Queen, and that's why she needs to be overthrown, because, it's not her, it's him, right?
So, frame stories we need to tell between now and the end of the season are the establishment of Christmas with Anatar Santa Claus, the establishment of this council of oligarchs, right? Yeah. That are kind of running the day-to-day running the legislation, right? Like, because she's running the day-to-day kind of bureaucratic structure, right?
Yeah. She's chief sheriff and postmaster general, right? I mean, it's like, look, she is Will Woodfoot. I changed my mind, right? Yeah.
And figurehead, because she lives up in the castle, on the thing. Yeah. Right. The Christmas revolt of Harad.
That's it.
I love it.
That's it. Yeah.
I love it.
And again, like, for her to be, especially at the beginning, this is why when we're doing the casting, I said that I want the Queen to be a generously proportioned woman. I want her to be like the mother figure of the city, right? And that should be the feel of it at the beginning, right? And she is beloved, again, not unlike Will Woodfoot is beloved, right? She's and respected, but with that particular kind of respect, not the real fear or reverence, right? But with affection. And yet, when things begin to turn, when people begin to believe that she is, she's been, basically, she's the cultist, right? She's the one who has been corrupted by, this northern fringe fanatic.
She welcomes Incarnu with open arms.
Incarnu, sorry. So there's this Incarnu's guy who's like, to the people, in Kanus, Gandalf looks like some kind of Rasputin figure almost, right? Like he's this alien sorcerer figure who's come in and he's ensorcelled the queen, and now he's gonna ban Christmas, and he's and this is, again, if there could be any more obvious evidence that he's completely undermining and corrupting their culture, what else could it be?
You don't want to be on the side of the war against Christmas. I'm here to tell you.
You don't. Yeah. And he's telling them they can't have. So it's got to be almost Christmas, by the way. That's easy enough, right? Like the celebration is the celebration in the Temple of Sauron, right? So like I mean, we could even. So all we need is some references to, like, they could be starting to decorate the Temple of Sauron, right? We're already decking the halls there in the old temple. I don't know what we deck them with exactly, but we halls need to be decked. That's all I'm saying. So we're decking the halls with something, and we're preparing for the Christmas celebration. Christmas in Heart. This is great. I love it. I love it.
So it's funny. Haringil, who has drawn a lot of maps for us in the past, he commented on. Marie put out a synopsis of the frame story thus far, and he's like, I'll tell you, this story makes me really uncomfortable because, like, there are so many really fiddly, like, political and religious and cultural bits to it. And I'll tell you, like, if this frame story can make every person of every political and religious stripe uncomfortable.
Yes.
I will feel like we have done it perfectly.
We've done it exactly right. Yes. Everybody should be uncomfortable. Yep.
Like you should see things that you believe in and push for in the bad guys' motives and motivations.
Keep Sauron in Christmas. Sorry, I'm still loving that campaign. Yeah. Oh man, it gives so much.
That's gotta go on a T-shirt.
Keep Sauron in Christmas.
Yes.
Hey, we can do that now.
We can do that. Yes, we can do that. I will suggest something along these lines. It would be kind of a niche product in the Signum store, but we can make it happen.
I'll take two.
Yeah. No, I like it. But no, there's so, and again, and it's just this, one of the things that I love about this whole element of what we've developed here is that it makes, like, the angle of the mouth of Sauron writes itself. Like, it's so easy now to imagine. That was one of the harder things, right? Like, how do you bring in, like, kind of creepy street preacher whom, like how do we especially given how little time we have to show anything, right? How do you show him gaining a foothold, right? But if he's coming in and it's seasonal, right? Like, it's like we're getting towards, Haradrim Christmas, and
it's that time of year again.
It's that time of year, and he comes in and he, like, tells awesome stories about Sauron and about Anatar and which and he's helping them recover their culture. Like let's make this a Christmas to remember, and we're gonna do new, and he can tell them, like, as they're like normally they do like a little bit of stuff because they do have their celebrations there in the temple, right? And they have their feasts and stuff like that. And he's encouraging that.
Yeah. Like, there's a parade route where they carry the Anatar statue and then they sit it right in the altar of the ancient temple, which of course has no significance. That has no significance. That's just the place.
It's what you do. Yeah. It's what you do. And Maria's cautioning us that we should remember that it's a bad idea to be on the wrong side of the war against Christmas. No, but I agree. Yeah, absolutely. But see, he's going to come in. The mouth of Sauron comes in, and wait, hang on a second. Did we have the mouth of Sauron be female? We did, didn't we?
Yes.
I've been saying he, and that's an accident. Sorry. She comes in and she's able to, like, tell them stories and be like, let me, like, she's like cultural enrichment, right? She's
This is what cements the younger brother's position as the mouth of Sauron, because he becomes the head of the cult of Sauron in Far Harad.
Yes. Yes.
Sunday school is what did it.
Well, it's it's the recovery. It's the cultural recovery, right? Yeah. It's the getting in touch with their roots.
I do love the idea that our Harad frame story is boiling down to culture wars.
No, I mean it was always gonna be, right? It was always gonna be, but no, man, whew, boy.
Marie, I'm not gonna be careful. I'm gonna wear my Keep Sauron and Christmas T-shirt in the streets of Lynchburg, Virginia, and it's gonna be awesome. I will.
Oh man,
I look forward to it.
I can't wait.
This is spectacular. No, of course, like, keep in mind, we're still using Christmas metaphorically here, people, right? We're not actually talking about Christmas. We're talking about a cultural parallel to Christmas, and we're calling it Christmas in our discussion here as a heuristic, right? As a placekeeper for whatever it is, the cultural ceremony that they have, which is in fact not going to look much like Christmas, except I like the gifts to children thing. That should giving your children gifts on this.
Gifts.
The giving of gifts. Yeah.
Little tin rings.
Oh man, yes. Oh man.
No.
Yeah.
There's a young boy who gets the most beautiful young boy in all the city. Instead of a statue, is the one sitting on the throne, and he has a bag of little tin rings that he just throws out as he goes.
Throws out the rings. Yeah. Yeah, and everybody. So you're saying that, like, the tin rings that everybody wears, maybe you wear a lot of them. Like, so now we're doing Mardi Gras too. So it's Christmas and Mardi Gras rolled into one in the streets of Harad. Oh man, yeah.
No, actually, I do like the really pretty 12-year-old boy instead of the statue bit, though. Like, right. He's Anatar for the day.
So it's like a pageant. It's like a pageant. Yeah.
Well, he's chosen well in advance, right?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Oh man. Oh yeah. And the food. I mean, oh man, like, it's going to be an amazing food holiday, right? Yeah. I guess now, of course, I've got Mardi Gras in my head too. This is me busily combining Mardi Gras and Christmas. Now, sorry, go ahead. Dave.
I'm like imagining curried sea bass for some reason. I don't know why.
Why not? Oh,
can we at some future myth moot, can we celebrate this holiday?
Talk about making people uncomfortable. And then we can talk about the ancient Sauronic roots of this ceremony, right? Yeah.
Curried sea bass is the thing.
Curried sea bass. Yeah.
Do we think the cult and the coup are drawing their support predominantly from younger Haradrim?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think, really, this is going to be cross-generational, because this is going to have gone on for generations.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Right?
Yeah, I think you're right.
But certainly, it's
the loudest ones are,
or maybe there'll be a circle of the feisty, like maybe the older Haradrim will be kind of the grumpier, just, they're the ones that are grumbling about how everything's changing, but it'll be like this circle of young Haradrim around.
We've already shown them.
Around Faramir, exactly, who are the radicals.
Well, and here's I would think that one of the natural cultural divides in the kind of city and the kind of economy that we've been talking about, right? There are going to be like the merchant oligarchs, essentially, who are going to be the ruling council. Very Lake Town-like, right? Up with the bowmen, down with money bags is going to be something like what we're going to be getting. So they are going to be, they're not going to be as invested, right? the ceremony, right? This whole Mardi Gras Christmas celebration is going to be. The tax collectors don't care, right? I mean, they celebrate it, like they go along with it, they're fine with it, but it's not really like they're not the ones carrying floats and catching rings which they put on their fingers, right? It's going to be primarily the people. It's going to be the fishermen. It's going to be the farmers. It's going to be the weavers. It's going to be the common people, and those are going to be the ones both whom the Faramir character is going to have the connection with, and who are going to rise up ultimately and throw down the money bags, including his mom.
So Marie asks, do any of the oligarchs betray the queen and side with the rebellion? And I swear I read it as, do any of the Oliphants
betray the queen? Well,
wait, what?
Oh, wait, hang on a second. I forgot, though. We need at least... we still have to have... Because we cannot possibly do this frame without having Gandalf riding a white Oliphant. That's got to happen at some point.
That's a high priority. We're working on it.
Okay, good. Yeah. That's got to be crucial. But it's too bad because, of course, Oliphants taking part in the procession would be natural, but Gandalf would not be part of the ceremony. I mean, Gandalf would be like the Oliver Cromwell of that particular Christmas ceremony, especially when it's being led by the priestess figure, the Mount of Sauron.
He steals the white elephant that the
traditional white elephant
is supposed to ride on.
Yeah, that's he throws the rings from the top of
the older son.
Yeah.
Make a crash escape with it on the white elephant, followed by the other Oliphants behind them.
Right, and this is an outrage to the people. This is one of the tipping points, right? Because here he's gone and wrecked.
This is after the coup, because they're not going to make a run for it
before
then. Yeah,
right. So he escapes on the ceremonial elephant, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
As just I see. Like a fine be that way kind of gesture.
Right. I thought you were talking about Gandalf actually ruining the parade, but that might be too strong, perhaps.
A nice moment of levity, a comedy scene of Gandalf causing the totally disrupting the parade.
Yeah. Okay. No, I got it. I'm following. I'm tracking with the final scene, or the final episode, Gandalf escaping by white elephant.
I like the idea now that Gandalf's arrival is it'll become apparent pretty quickly that it's ill-fated.
Yes,
because he plays right into their hands. He gets immediately branded as a representative of the imperialists from the north.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
Because I would think their relationship with Gondor would be pretty. I mean, the Corsairs are between them and Gondor, so their relationship with Gondor. I mean, which, in other words, the Gondorians don't go a lot further south, and they don't get past the Corsairs very much. So they wouldn't have much direct interaction with the Gondor, but they'd know about them, right? They would certainly have heard about them.
They would consider them historical oppressors, though.
Historical oppressors, who they were fortunate that they never made it down this far. Right. I mean, they almost made it down this far, but not quite as far as this.
That's the story the Corsairs have been telling. We're protecting you.
They're protecting you from Gondor, right? Yeah, exactly. You have us to thank that you're not, that you're not a subject kingdom now. Yes. Yeah. So it's not about Gondor diminishing. It's about the Corsairs doing a better and better job as time goes on, right? As far as their propaganda goes.
So Marie's pointing out that our original thought was that Gandalf got here on a Gondorian trade ship. I don't think that that's impossible for that to have happened.
No.
This guy, that captain probably has to pay off, the people of Umbar, but it's probably bribes, textiles that you can get from this particular city.
I'm thinking the Corsairs. Again, I think the Corsairs are still shady. I think that the Corsairs are still not a pleasant culture,
right?
Even pre-return of Sauron. if there is a group of folks who are ready to the hand of Sauron when he returns, it's the Corsairs, I'm thinking. But because again, they're ready to sign up for anybody that's going to help give them leverage against Gondor, because they're still bearing the most active grudge there. So, you know, I would think that maybe, but again, this needn't be much more than a beginning part of the conversation with the Gondorian captain that we were talking about in the first scene. Not many Gondorian ships come down this far, right? I mean, it's not unheard of, but it's unusual for them to come down.
He could even be a smuggler. Like, as soon as he gets out of sight of land, he hauls up the flag of Umbar and just doesn't, you know.
Right. He doesn't have to be a Gondorian patriot necessarily.
Right.
Yeah, because I would think that the seas around Umbar would not be safe for Gondorian merchant ships, even now, even before the return of Sauron. I mean,
not without having to pay people off.
Significantly pay people
because
off,
it's obviously it's easier to collect tribute than it is to, you know, actually engage in a battle.
Right, it is. Though seizing vessels is more profitable than taking tribute too, if you can back it up, which I think they can. Again, I think the Corsairs control the ocean there. But anyway, yeah, but yes, that I mean, this the act of his you know, raising the flag of Umbar would be a talking point between him and Gandalf, right, to explain about where they're going and what's going on there. So sure. Yeah. Yes, yeah, Maria, exactly. Corsairs are pirates by definition, so they do have to make efforts to get by Umbar. That's just. I mean, it would not be safe waters for a Gondorian trade ship, but a resourceful Gondorian captain who's willing to, you know, there would be certainly profit in him going down and coming back with textiles from this city. He could turn a fine profit, you know, in Dol Amroth or Minas Tirith if he is able to do it.
I'd be willing to bet that there's not like a thriving linens trade in like the part of Middle Earth that we know of. Right. It's not a fantastic climate for it.
Right. Yeah.
Very wet.
Exactly. So yeah, no, I think that works. All right. I think we've solved all the problems. Have we solved all the problems? I think we're pretty well done. Now, we haven't worked through all the details of the plot. But that's okay. You guys can work through all the details of the plot.
You can figure that out.
I mean, I think we have it sort of sketched, and we have a bunch of memorable scenes. The Christmas, the Fat Christmas parade, for instance.
Yes.
The
temple.
With the temple. Yeah.
At least one. There has to be at least one on-screen meal with curried sea bass.
Curried sea bass. There we go. Yeah.
So I'll tell you. So the thing I love about the Christmas parade is that it's uncomfortable for both the people who are hardcore, fighting the war on the side of Christmas, and also it's uncomfortable for people who are but all cultures are wonderful and beautiful and amazing. Yes. And it's
I agree. No, there's no, but you're right. I totally agree with you that nobody should be comfortable with this frame. I think we've succeeded in alienating everyone, which is pretty much what TV shows go for usually, isn't it? Right? To be equally offensive to almost everyone. Right.
I mean, it depends. Are you writing the sequel trilogy for Star Wars? Is that the plan?
I don't mean offensive in that way, but yeah, no, I get you. I get you. Okay, well, cool. No, this is great. Okay, so that was fantastic. Well, next time, in session number 26 of season 5, we will be back to the plot. So we'll be discussing episode 5. So I think we got through everything but the frame story. So we'll need to return to the plots from the frame, catch up on some of the exact frame plots, which of course we've now set up beautifully, and then we get into episode 5. So little spoiler: is episode 5? Is this our next Howith episode?
Yes.
Okay, so we've got right. The Haladin on the move is where we're headed next time.
Mm-hmm. And
awesome.
Galadriel meets the men who will be of the House of
Hador. The unfriendship of the Green Elves is where we're going next time. Oh, good. Excellent, fantastic. That'll be fun. Okay, so we're gonna get Galadriel and Celeborn on their honeymoon. We're gonna get the unfriendship of the Green Elves. We're gonna get the March of the Haladin. Fantastic. That's gonna be awesome. Cool. Very good. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. This has been a really fun session. Thank you, Nick and Dave. That was a great discussion. I think we did a lot of good work, especially if you consider being offensive to almost everybody good work. And anyway, this was fantastic. So I will say, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed.